Laura had been staring at the same star chart for 3 hours when the alarm broke through her concentration, like a knife through silk. The outpost was quiet most days, almost too quiet, and she had grown accustomed to the gentle hum of the life support systems and the soft whisper of recycled air moving through the ventilation shafts. Her name was Laura Mitchell, and she was 28 years old, though sometimes she felt much older after spending so much time alone among the stars. The observation deck was her favorite place on the entire station, a place where she could watch the universe turn and feel small in the best possible way. She looked out at the twin moons of Zephyr, watching them dance their ancient waltz around the barren planet below. The planet itself was a study in desolation, a world of red dust and towering rock formations that had never known life or the touch of water. Scientists had theorized about Zephyr for centuries, wondering if perhaps in an earlier age it had been a thriving world before something catastrophic had stripped away its atmosphere and left it dead. Laura had been assigned to study that atmosphere, or what remained of it, and to send back reports to Earth Command. Most of her reports went unread. Most of her messages back home went unanswered for weeks or months. She had made peace with her isolation long ago, or at least she thought she had until the alarm changed everything. The sound echoed through the corridors of Outpost 7, a sharp wailing that sent adrenaline flooding through her veins. Laura's hands moved instinctively toward the communication console, her fingers flying across the haptic interface with practiced efficiency. The screen bloomed to life, displaying a stream of data that made no sense at first. There was a ship approaching from deep space, a vessel that was not registered in any human database, not listed in any treaty or trade agreement. The ship was moving toward the outpost with purposeful speed, and its signature was unlike anything in the human fleet. The design was elegant and strange, with curves that seemed organic somehow, as if the ship itself were a living thing made of metal and light. Laura's heart hammered against her ribs as she reached for the communication system to contact Commander Harrison in the operations center. The commander was a gruff man in his 50s who had seen action in the Mars campaigns and had grown tired of combat. Now he spent his days managing a small research outpost that most people forgot existed. His voice crackled through her headset a moment later, and she could hear the confusion in his tone as he asked what she was seeing. Laura described the approaching vessel in detail, every specification and measurement that the station's sensors could detect. Commander Harrison told her to stay put and maintain observation protocols. He would alert the higher authorities and prepare the station's defenses, though everyone knew that Outpost 7 had no real defenses to speak of. The station was a scientific facility, not a military installation, and its weapon systems had been decommissioned years ago to make room for research equipment. Laura waited in the observation deck, her breath coming shallow and fast as the alien ship descended toward the landing pad far below. She could see it now with her naked eyes, a shape that seemed to shift and shimmer in the starlight, as if it existed partially in dimensions that human eyes could not quite perceive. The landing was gentle and controlled, the work of a pilot who understood their vessel completely. Laura made a decision that she would later realize had changed the course of her entire life. Instead of waiting for orders from Commander Harrison or any other authority, she made her way down to the landing pad in her emergency protective suit. She told herself she was just being thorough, just doing her job as a scientist who needed to gather data. The truth was something more complicated, something that she could not quite name but felt like curiosity mixed with destiny. The landing pad was cold and empty when she arrived, bathed in the pale blue light of the two moons. The night cycle was beginning on this side of the outpost, and the stars seemed to come alive in the darkness. The alien ship sat silent for a long moment, and then the door began to open with a hiss of pressurized air. The figure that emerged from within the ship was nothing like Laura had expected, and yet she found herself holding her breath, as if she had always known that something like this was coming. He was tall, perhaps 6.5 feet in height, with a form that was humanoid in basic structure but distinctly alien in every detail. His skin shimmered with a color that seemed to shift between silver and blue depending on how the light caught it, as if his very flesh was made of water and light combined. His eyes were large and luminous, a shade of violet that seemed to contain entire nebulae within their depths. He wore clothing that appeared to be woven from some kind of crystalline material, and it caught the light and scattered it in 1,000 different directions. When he moved, it was with a grace that seemed impossible, each step a demonstration of perfect balance and control. He raised a hand in a gesture that could have meant many things, but Laura interpreted it as peaceful. A translation device on his wrist began to emit sounds that the outpost systems converted into English words. His voice was smooth and warm, like the rumble of distant thunder or the hum of a vast machine. He introduced himself as Kale, Crown Prince of the Viridian Empire, and he explained that his people had been observing humanity for a very long time. He said that Earth and its colonies had caught the attention of his civilization because they displayed qualities that were rare among the species they had encountered in their travels through the stars. He said that humanity possessed resilience, creativity, and a capacity for growth that suggested they might one day become great. He said that he had come to this outpost specifically to meet with a representative of humanity and to propose that a dialogue begin between their two civilizations. Laura found herself stepping forward, her mind racing with 1,000 questions, but all she could manage to say was that she was honored to meet him and that she was uncertain if she was the right person to conduct such important negotiations. Kale smiled, and it was a smile that seemed to light up the night around them. He said that sometimes the most important meetings happen with people who do not expect to become important, that perhaps fate or destiny or whatever force guided the universe had brought them together for a reason that neither of them could yet understand. He asked if she would be willing to speak with him and share what she knew about humanity and the human condition. Laura said yes without hesitation, and in that moment she did not realize that she was beginning a journey that would take her to the heights of joy and the depths of despair, that would challenge everything she believed about love and trust and the possibility of connection across the vast distances that separated worlds. The weeks that followed Laura's first meeting with Kale seemed to unfold like a dream, each day more surreal than the last. Commander Harrison had been initially skeptical about allowing the alien prince to remain on the station, but Kale's diplomatic skills and gentle demeanor had won over even the most hardened military officer. The higher authorities on Earth had issued strict protocols for interaction, but they also seemed fascinated by the possibility of establishing peaceful relations with an advanced alien civilization. Laura found herself appointed as the primary liaison between Kale and the human command structure, a role that she had never sought but that seemed to have chosen her. She and Kale began to spend enormous amounts of time together, hours that blended into days that blended into weeks. They would walk through the corridors of the outpost together, Kale marveling at the human-made technology and the designs that reflected humanity's particular way of thinking about problems and solutions. He would ask her endless questions about Earth and its cultures and its history. He wanted to know about love and art and music, about the things that made humans strive and dream and believe in futures that seemed impossible. Laura found that she could talk to him in ways that she had never been able to talk to anyone else. There was something about Kale that made her feel safe, that made her feel like he truly cared about understanding not just humanity as a concept, but her as an individual. They began to visit the observation deck together at night, standing before the vast expanse of stars and talking about philosophy and the nature of existence. Kyle explained to her how his people understood the universe as a living entity, conscious and aware in ways that human science had not yet discovered. He told her about the Viridian Empire, a vast civilization spanning thousands of star systems, with technologies and knowledge that made human science seem like the drawings of children. But he also told her that his empire had lost something precious along the way, that in pursuing power and expansion, they had forgotten how to truly connect with other beings. He said that meeting her had reminded him of why connection mattered, why the individual human life had value beyond its utility. Laura felt herself falling deeper under his spell with each passing day. She began to understand that what she was experiencing was love, a kind of love that transcended the boundaries of species and biology and training. She found herself thinking about him when they were apart, imagining futures that seemed impossible even to contemplate. She began to share things with him that she had never shared with anyone, fears and dreams and the deep loneliness that had defined so much of her adult life. Kale listened to all of it with an attention and care that made her feel truly seen, for perhaps the first time in her existence. One evening, standing in the observation deck as the twin moons rose over Zephyr, Kale told her something that changed everything. He said that his father, the Viridian Emperor, had expressed anger about his extended stay on the outpost. He said that the Emperor believed Kale should have returned to the Empire months ago, that prolonging this diplomatic mission served no strategic purpose. Kale said that his father had issued what amounted to an ultimatum, that Kale must either return to the Viridian Empire immediately or face severe consequences. Kale explained that his father did not understand their connection, that the Emperor viewed all other species as tools to be used rather than peoples to be understood and respected. Kale said that his father had even suggested that perhaps Kale was becoming weak, that his time with humans was corrupting his judgment and his ability to serve the Empire. Laura felt her heart clench at the thought of Kale leaving, of returning to his world and his duty and his family obligations. She asked him what he was going to do, her voice shaking slightly. Kale took her hands in his, and his skin felt warm and electric against her own. He said that he did not know, that he was torn between his duty to his people and his love for her and the life they had begun to build together. He said that what he wanted more than anything was to find a way to stay, to continue their relationship and their work toward peace between their civilizations. He said that he was prepared to defy his father if necessary, that his love for her was worth the risk. Laura believed him completely. She wanted to believe him, needed to believe him because the alternative was a future without him in it. She asked him what she could do to help, what information or resources he might need to convince his father that Earth was worth understanding rather than conquering. She asked if there was anything that might make the situation better. Kale was quiet for a long moment, and then he asked if she would be willing to share some information about the station's systems and the defense protocols that Earth had in place. He explained that if he could bring his father detailed information about human capabilities, it might convince the Emperor that Earth was not a threat, but rather a potential ally. He said that if his father could be made to understand that humans were advanced enough to be respected, rather than conquered, then perhaps the Emperor would grant permission for Kale to remain. Laura hesitated for only a moment. She told herself that she was not betraying humanity, but rather serving humanity's future. She told herself that by giving Kyle this information, she was actually preventing conflict, ensuring peace, protecting the billions of lives on Earth and throughout human space. She began to access the station's classified files, providing Kale with detailed technical specifications and defense protocols. She showed him the layouts of military installations and the capabilities of human weapon systems. She shared intelligence about the political divisions between Earth's nations and the fragmentation of human space exploration efforts. All of it she gave to him freely, never once questioning whether she was making a terrible mistake. All of it she gave to him because she loved him and because she wanted to believe that love could overcome the vast distances and deep differences between their peoples. She did not know that with each file she shared and each secret she revealed, she was stepping closer to the moment that would shatter her world entirely. The message arrived on Laura's personal terminal at 3 a.m, when she was alone in her quarters and the outpost was bathed in the silence of the night cycle. She had been unable to sleep, as she often was these nights, her mind churning with thoughts of Kale and the future they might build together. When the notification appeared on her screen, she almost did not open it, sensing somehow that whatever news it contained would not be good. But curiosity and something deeper, some animal instinct that warned her to pay attention, compelled her to read the message. It was encrypted with codes that should have been impossible to crack, using Viridian encryption protocols that human technology should not have been able to interpret. Yet somehow the outpost's translation systems had converted it into English, word after word that felt like a knife being driven through her chest. The message was from Kale's father, the Viridian Emperor himself, and the words it contained were cold and clinical and utterly devastating. The Emperor explained with mathematical precision that Kale had been conducting an infiltration mission from the beginning. He explained that the Viridian Empire had identified humanity as a potential threat to their expansion plans, that Earth's rapid technological development and the spread of human colonies throughout nearby star systems represented a challenge to Viridian dominance. He explained that Kale's assignment had been to gain the trust of an important human, to extract detailed intelligence about human capabilities and defenses, and to provide his people with the strategic information they would need to conduct a swift and overwhelming invasion. The Emperor wrote that this invasion was already in motion, that the Viridian fleet was preparing to launch an assault that would take place within 3 months, and that Kale's work in gathering intelligence would be crucial to the success of that military operation. The message included video footage, and Laura found herself watching as Kale sat with other Viridian officers aboard his ship, laughing and discussing the intelligence he had gathered. She watched as he reviewed classified human military specifications and discussed the fragmentation of human forces. She watched as he spoke about her with contempt, referring to her as naive and emotionally unstable in ways that made the other officers laugh. She watched as he described his seduction of her as simple and effective, exactly what the Emperor had expected from such an emotionally vulnerable human female. Each word felt like being stabbed repeatedly, and Laura found herself struggling to breathe. She wanted to deny what she was seeing, wanted to believe that somehow this was a trick or a fake or something engineered to break her spirit. But deep down she knew the truth. Deep down she had always known something was not quite right about how easily Kale had agreed to every request she made, how smoothly their conversations had flowed, how perfectly he had seemed to understand her vulnerabilities. She had ignored the small voice inside her that had tried to warn her, the part of her that knew better than to trust someone so quickly and so completely. Instead, she had allowed hope and loneliness and desire to override her common sense and her training. Laura sat in the darkness of her quarters for a long time, feeling something inside her die. When she finally moved, it was with the cold clarity of someone who had just been betrayed in the most profound way possible. She made her way to Kale's quarters on the upper level of the outpost. She did not call ahead. She did not announce herself. She simply pressed the access code that Kale had given her and walked inside to find him there, preparing his belongings as if he intended to leave. When he saw her face, something changed in his expression, and she saw something that might have been guilt or regret or simply fear that his plans had been discovered. Kale stood and moved toward her, his hands extended in what looked like a gesture of supplication. He began to speak, his voice still smooth and warm, trying to convince her that it was not what she thought, that the situation was more complicated than the Emperor's message had suggested. But Laura interrupted him, her voice steady despite the rage and pain that threatened to consume her from the inside out. She told him she knew everything, that she had read his father's message, that she had seen the video footage of him mocking her and the entire human race. She told him that she had trusted him, that she had given him access to classified information, that she had compromised her mission and her integrity, and every principle she held dear because she believed that he loved her. She told him that she had been a fool, that she deserved whatever punishment came to her for her betrayal of humanity. Kale's response was not what she expected. He did not make excuses or try to deflect blame. Instead, he simply stood there, and for the first time since they had met, she saw his composure crack. He said quietly that she was right, that he had been ordered to do exactly what he had done, that his instructions had been clear and absolute. But then he said something else, something that confused her because it did not match the coldness she had heard in the video footage. He said that somewhere during the weeks they had spent together, something had changed inside him. He said that the orders had seemed to matter less and less as he had gotten to know her. He said that he had started to question whether his people were right, whether conquest and domination were truly the best way to relate to other species. He said that he loved her, and that the love he felt was real even if the original mission was not. Laura wanted to believe him. Part of her desperately wanted to accept his words as truth, and to believe that love could transform even the deepest betrayal into something redemptive. But she could not. The trust between them had been shattered, and no amount of his words could repair it. She told him coldly that she was reporting everything to Commander Harrison and to Earth authorities, that his entire infiltration mission had been discovered, and that humanity would now prepare for the invasion he had come to facilitate. She told him that she no longer cared whether his feelings were real or false because it did not matter anymore. The damage had been done, and now she had to deal with the consequences of her own catastrophic failure of judgment. The communication Laura sent to Commander Harrison at 4 a.m. changed everything. Within minutes, the outpost was transformed from a peaceful scientific facility into a military command center. Orders began flowing in from Earth, from the military governors of the various human colonies, from scientists and strategists who had suddenly realized that the invasion threat they had largely ignored might actually be real. Laura was escorted to a secure debriefing room, where she was questioned intensely about everything she had shared with Kale, every piece of classified information she had given him, every detail about Viridian technology and strategy that he had discussed with her. Military officers with hard eyes and harder voices made it clear that she had compromised human security on a catastrophic scale. She was informed that she would likely face court-martial and possible treason charges. The only thing that might save her was if the information she provided now could help humanity prepare for the coming invasion. Laura answered every question truthfully, giving them everything she could remember about Viridian capabilities and military doctrine. She told them about the Emperor's timeline, the fact that an invasion was scheduled to begin within weeks rather than months. She explained the structure of the Viridian fleet and the different ship classes that made up their military. She described the weapon systems and the propulsion technology and the shields that protected their vessels. By the time her debriefing ended and the sun was rising over the barren landscape of Zephyr, humanity was mobilizing for war in a way it had not done in decades. Military vessels began to converge from throughout human space. Research scientists worked frantically to understand Viridian technology and develop countermeasures. World leaders met in emergency sessions to coordinate their response and prepare the populations of Earth and the colonies for conflict. Kale was arrested and placed in a high-security detention facility on the station. Laura was not allowed to see him, and she told herself she did not want to. She told herself that he had made his choices and now had to live with the consequences. But the truth was more complicated. Despite everything, she felt a strange pull toward him, a desire to understand how someone could say they loved her and simultaneously betray her so completely. The invasion came faster than anyone expected. The first warning was a sensor alert indicating massive warp signatures appearing at the edge of human space. Within hours, the Viridian fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel, a vast armada of warships and transports spreading out across human territory. The scale of it was almost impossible to comprehend. Thousands of vessels, each one larger and more powerful than anything in the human fleet. Military commanders began to despair as they realized how outmatched humanity was. The first battles were devastating. Human ships engaged the Viridian vessels, and the technology gap became immediately apparent. Viridian weapon systems cut through human shields like they were made of paper. Viridian ships maneuvered with impossible grace, avoiding human fire with ease. Entire fleets of human vessels were destroyed in moments. The casualties were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of human soldiers and pilots dying in the first days of combat. Laura watched the battles unfold on the monitors in the command center, feeling sick and helpless. She knew that she was responsible for this, that her betrayal of human security had contributed to this catastrophe. The weight of that knowledge was almost unbearable. And then something unexpected happened. In the middle of a crucial battle near the human colony world of Kepler-7, 3 Viridian warships suddenly turned on their own fleet. They began attacking the other Viridian vessels, their weapons tearing through ships that they had served alongside for years. The sudden betrayal created chaos in the Viridian formation. Human ships took advantage of the confusion to strike back harder than they had been able to before. For the first time since the invasion began, human forces achieved something that looked like a victory. Laura realized immediately who was responsible. She made her way to the detention area where Kale was being held, demanding access to him. Security personnel tried to stop her, but she outranked them in the research hierarchy and she pushed past them until she stood before his cell. Kale looked like he had been beaten, his shimmering skin bruised and his eyes dull with exhaustion. When he saw her, his entire body went rigid. He approached the barrier between them and pressed his hand against it. He said simply that he had done what he could to help, that he had accessed his ship's systems remotely and convinced the captains of those 3 vessels to turn against the invasion fleet. He said that it would not be enough to stop his father's invasion, but perhaps it would buy humanity some time. He said that he had made his choice, that he had chosen her over his empire, that he had chosen to believe that peace and connection between their peoples was possible. Laura found herself crying, angry tears that confused her because she did not know if she was crying for him or for everything that had been lost. She asked him why he had done this, what had changed his mind. Kyle said that watching her face when she read his father's message had shattered something inside him. He said that he had seen the betrayal and the pain, and he had realized in that moment that he could not live with himself if he allowed his people to destroy the person he loved and the future they might have together. He said that his redemption would likely cost him his life, but at least his death would mean something. He said that at least his sacrifice might show his people and humanity both that there was another way to live. The war lasted for 16 days. It was not a long war in the grand scheme of history, but it felt like an eternity to those who lived through it. In those 16 days, humanity mobilized every resource. fought with a desperation born of knowing that they were facing annihilation. Kale's sabotage of the 3 Viridian warships had indeed given them time. Time to organize a more effective defense, time to develop countermeasures against some of Viridian weapons systems. The turning point came when human military strategists devised a tactic that exploited a weakness in Viridian shield technology that Kale had described to Laura during one of their late-night conversations. The information that he had so carefully explained to her, thinking at the time that he was gathering intelligence for his father, proved to be crucial to human survival. When the Viridian Emperor realized that his invasion was not going to succeed, that his fleet was being damaged faster than he could replace it, and that human forces were beginning to inflict serious casualties, he issued an order to retreat. The shame of this retreat was apparently sufficient that the Emperor recalled his entire invasion force and withdrew to Viridian space. The war was over, but it left behind enormous casualties and deep scars in humanity's collective consciousness. Millions had died in the conflict. Entire colonies had been devastated, and there was hunger for vengeance against the Viridian people and against the traitor Kale, who had brought this catastrophe upon humanity. The trial was held 2 months after the end of the war, when the immediate crisis had passed and enough order had been restored that formal judicial proceedings could take place. The International War Crimes Court convened on Earth itself, in a room with ancient stone walls and high windows that looked out onto the Pacific Ocean. Kale was brought before the court in restraints, looking smaller somehow than Laura remembered, diminished by captivity and by the weight of judgment that hung over him. He was charged with infiltration and espionage, with providing false information with the intent to facilitate invasion, and with facilitating the deaths of millions through his actions. The prosecution presented evidence of his mission, the video footage of him discussing human weaknesses with Viridian officers, the classified information he had gathered. They painted a picture of a calculating alien intelligence that had used Laura's emotions against her to extract information about human defenses. The defense argued that Kale had acted under orders from his government, that he had been following military protocol, that he could not be held accountable for actions taken as a soldier of his empire. But then something unexpected happened. Kale himself asked to testify in his own defense, and the court allowed it. He stood before the judges and told them the truth about his original mission, about his orders to infiltrate human space and gather intelligence. He did not try to excuse his actions or minimize the damage they had caused. He simply stated the facts and then explained how everything had changed when he met Laura. He described falling in love with her, the moment he had realized that his empire was wrong, that conquest and domination could not be the basis for a healthy relationship between species. He described making the choice to sabotage his own fleet and to provide critical information to humanity. He acknowledged that his actions had been too little and too late, that millions had still died, that his redemption was incomplete and insufficient. He said that he understood if humanity decided to execute him for his crimes, that he accepted whatever judgment they rendered because he deserved punishment for what he had done initially. But he asked that they consider the possibility that people, whether human or Viridian, could change, that love and connection could transform even the deepest betrayals into something that might eventually lead to healing. Laura sat in the gallery during the trial, listening to every word. She had wanted to hate him, wanted to believe that his betrayal was complete and total and unforgivable. But watching him face judgment with such clarity and acceptance, she found that her hatred had transformed into something more complex. She understood that he had been a product of his upbringing and his culture, that he had been trained to view other species as less than fully real. She understood that falling in love with her had awakened something in him that his people had never wanted him to discover. She did not know if she could ever truly forgive him, but she realized that she no longer wanted him dead. The judges deliberated for 3 days. Their final verdict was surprising to many. Kale would not be executed. Instead, he would be imprisoned for the rest of his natural life, which, based on Viridian biology, could be several centuries. He would be held in a secure facility, but he would be allowed to have contact with select individuals, including Laura, if she wished. Additionally, he would be required to work with military researchers to share all knowledge he possessed about Viridian technology and strategy, to help humanity develop defenses and countermeasures. Kale accepted the verdict without protest or plea for mercy. As he was being led away, he looked up at the gallery where Laura was sitting. His luminous eyes met hers across the distance of the courtroom, and she saw in them a complex mixture of regret and love. and desperate hope. He mouthed words that the court's translation systems picked up and broadcast throughout the chamber. He said that he was sorry, that his apology could never be enough, that he understood if she chose never to see him again. But he said that he loved her, that he had loved her truly even in the midst of his betrayal, and that loving her had changed him in ways that made his imprisonment seem bearable. He said that if humanity would not believe him, if history would not give him credit for his sacrifice, then at least his example might show both species that there was more to life than conquest and power. He said that his greatest hope was that someday, perhaps after many years or many generations, humans and Viridians might learn to see each other as people rather than as threats or enemies. Laura left the courtroom feeling profoundly unsettled. She had expected the trial to provide closure, to give her a clear sense of justice served and wrongs righted. Instead, she found herself with more questions than answers. She did not know if Cale's love was real or if it was simply another form of manipulation. She did not know if she could ever rebuild her life in the wake of her betrayal. She did not know what the future held for humanity and the Viridian Empire, whether Cale's sacrifice might eventually lead to understanding, or whether it would simply be lost to history. What she did know was that her life had been forever changed by her encounter with an alien prince, that she had learned more about love and betrayal and the complexity of the human heart than she had ever wanted to know. And as she walked out of the courthouse into the bright sunlight of Earth, she realized that she might need to visit him in prison, if only to understand what it meant to truly forgive.